Oh, we're live. Here we go.
Scripted
Hey,
as
gang.
always. Welcome back.
Tony freezes right as we go live.
I cut out again.
And that's what Elkhart, Indiana does to you.
Stop saying that word.
He's got an on. It's not, you always talk about like a hamster that runs on a wheel, right? That runs like electricity. And instead, where he's from, it's an Amish person. They churn butter.
It's horse and buggy.
It's a butter churner that runs electricity in his internet. So he runs out of that. But hey, listen, guys. Hey, glad to have you on. We got old CG3, Curtis Garrett, on the show. God, he's been on what's maybe the third, fourth time now.
Yeah.
But you know what? With over 3 years, I mean, it's always like a good interval and to bring you on, because LTL, I hate it only because I don't know it and don't do it. Yep. So it's like I don't hate it, but I don't
hate it because you ain't it, right? Technically, I mean,
thank you. I'm a hater. I don't dabble in it, but so it's always fun to have you on, because you bring some perspectives that actually do help. People would follow it more. I do follow it enough to understand like how it affects the full truckload, how it affects like the other parts of the industry and things like that. So when I'm having conversations with shippers or whatever it is, and they're talking about, hey, I'm doing LTL, but this is happening or whatever, and I'm like, I've given you props, man. I don't know how many times I'm on the phone and be like, I got a friend, Curtis Garrett, he's the LTL guru, and he told me this or he said this or whatever. So it's always good. But for the people who don't know you, which most everybody does,
we do now.
Give us your background. What you've done, what you're doing now too, because I know there's a lot going on.
Yeah, for sure. Curtis Garrett, been in LTL my whole career. Started with Old Dominion the first 8 years there. Drove a truck, worked on dock operations, went into weights and inspections, and then that kind of got me down the pricing and yield rabbit trail, which I really enjoyed. Spent 8 years there, as I mentioned. Left in 2016 after spending a couple of years at the corporate office in North Carolina, where I still live, and jumped into a 3PL. And now here in the last 7-8 years, have been with 3 different managed trans providers. Took a 6-month break in 2018 and helped somebody start a little hotshot trucking company. Got them to 3 trucks, and then said adios. It wasn't working out for my lifestyle. And back into consulting and 3PL work. And the last couple years, a lot's been on, kind of the technology and innovation side. Just figuring out ways to do stuff better if possible. So right now I've got really 2 main things going on. I'm with Freight Plus, Boston-based managed trans provider. Good company to work with, whether you're an employee or whether you're a shipper, Tony. And then a year ago now, actually almost a year ago exactly, started my education and community brand in LTL called Understand LTL. And so far what that's looked like is a whole bunch of content, some online courses, and then getting really close here to a live event that we're doing, like not really a conference. It's more of a smaller, intimate setting, mastermind, I would call it. So about 10 really good speakers: Todd Poland from OD, Mike Campisi from the Estes family, Pat Martin also from Estes, and then from Venture 53, he does a lot of investing in the space. Lance Healy, the technology pioneer and wizard in LTL, and a bunch of other people. And then we're probably going to have 20 to 25 or so attendees. So it's going to be just very cozy, lots of Q&A, lots of discussion, and just kind of like a roundtable environment. So that's
awesome.
In November. Yeah.
In November, where?
It's in High Point, North Carolina. It's actually, we have a nice hotel, reserved and discounted rates and everything. But then the event itself is going to be in this old restored, I think it's like some sort of mill that is now called Congdon Yards. And the Congdons are the founders of Old Dominion. So
nice.
it's kind of like it works.
So how is Old Dominion in North Carolina? I thought that is like the name for Virginia, right?
They started in Richmond, Virginia, like down the road, like really them, Estes, and Overnight at the time, which UPS Freight, and then now T-Force. They all kind of started in the same neighborhood years ago, and then just one truck. I think they were hauling eggs. That was Old Dominion's first vertical that they were in, and then some point actually moved to High Point, North Carolina. Now they're technically in Thomasville, which is a bit of a smaller town, but pretty close.
Right there at
area.
High Point.
Yeah. Yep.
So they took the jet and flew up when I was at my previous employer and knocked on the door to let us know. We were the first ones to know that the leasing was going away.
Oh, the warehousing and leasing that they did. The truck leasing.
Truck leasing.
Yep.
We had a strategic plan that we would lease from Ryder, OD, and Penske to keep rates competitive, and you could always leverage that off of each other. And that was not my plan. I didn't come up with that or really care for it all that much because I didn't like the fact that we had to take out of 15 trucks. I had to take 3 here and 4 over there and 5 over to this place and 2 over there.
Yeah.
The maintenance schedule for me, it was a nightmare, but it was neat to be like that guy, where they came up and knocked on our door and said, "Hey, guess what?"
Yeah.
So I felt like at least if it wasn't me, I was next door to a guy that at least was a known commodity in that world where he flew up to say, "Tell us in person," and knock on the door at freaking 8:00 at night.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think they sold that arm off 5-6 years ago, maybe. Might have been longer. Now they're just, they're a machine. They're a money-making, good top service public company, just very efficient machine as a company, and looking less and less like that family company that they used to be.
My perspective of the whole LTL market is like Old Dominion is like the G-Wagon, right? It's the top notch. It's the one that you want. You need to afford it because it's worth it.
Right.
And then, there's some really good ones that are right below that. And then there's some ones that, they couldn't pay me to haul freight on them.
Yeah.
You've got hats of all of them, I'm sure, because you have that sweet.
I do.
I don't want to go off on a huge tangent, but tell me about your hat collection because that's awesome. I've been following this.
Yeah, I just like a lot of things. I just kind of did it by accident, and I was like, "Hey, who wants to send me a hat?" And I had a couple companies do it, and then I just posted about it on LinkedIn and kind of said, "Hey, I'm starting a wall of freight hats," and it kind of blew up, and I think I've had 70 or 80. Mainly carriers, but some brokers, some tech companies. I've had people dig like historical hats out. Like I've got a Carolina Freight hat.
Nice.
Some oldies, some of the old like Conway and stuff like that. So it's been pretty cool. And then I've gotten a few of those die cast trucks. And then recently somebody made me an Understand LTL die cast truck, which is sweet.
That's awesome.
That's like I can retire now.
Was that what's her name in Iowa?
No, it was, I think his name's Jason Lau.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I know who you're talking about. The other gal
that she does die-cast trucks.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, TJ.
Hi.
I'm back.
So Curtis, what happened? Like, I know, like when I stumbled across you, I hadn't really ever seen or heard from you before, and I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's like, he knows everything. And I felt, I don't mean to be mean to you, but Curtis, you made me feel dumb. I thought I knew LTL a little bit, and then I was listening to you, and I'm reading your stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much I don't know. I need to learn.
Curtis, it's not hard to do, Curtis.
Right, it's not. It's not. But that is a compliment.
Excuse me. Thank you.
That is a compliment.
I mean, I took a weird career path, and before I like started talking in public about it or posting or writing or anything, I mean, I'd been in the industry 11, 12 years. So I just kind of was like learning and had been with several companies or doing several things at Old Dominion. Like I I took lateral moves. I was the driver, which for a lot of people, that's like, LTL driving gig. You hang on to that. You rise up through the ranks. You get the schedules you want, the bids you want. And I jumped from that into W&I for like $50K a year. I could have made 100 plus back then as a driver. And people are like, what are you doing? But I liked it and it was a good job, but it just wasn't keeping me satisfied. And so I'm like, man, I like the combination of the numbers and the pricing and the costing stuff, but then still, connecting all that to real world stuff that I've talked about before. But that's just what kind of piqued my interest. And then I don't know, it's almost a challenge to like look at something a different way, take a different path. And at this point, there's not a lot of people that I rub shoulders with that have driven a truck and been on the dock and actually been up to their elbows in freight. So
right. And that's important too, because and I know it's it's easier in LTL to, because I feel like if you're gonna be successful in LTL, you really do have to dive in and use your brain. Like it's weird how it's structured, because like rates and margin and things like that, like they're not those aren't what your brain's really into as much as well, I guess rates, yes, but just the fact that you've got certain products and so many different products maybe on the same truck that are the way they fit and how much they are, what the rate is. And if you know well enough to even instruct some shippers on how they can do it better and how you can, there's value that you can bring there. That is what it is. Now you got to deal with the fact that 3 days late is on time and all that stuff, but that's part of I think it's to the point now where shippers just understand that's what it is. They're wanting to save money, and it's not something that they care when it gets there as much as if they did, they'd throw it in a Sprinter van, right? Or
right.
a box truck and pay more.
There's a cost to everything, right? Like in Truckload or Dedicated or Expedite, whatever, you're gonna pay more, like typically per pound or per shipment, depending on how full you cram them. But all the work and stress and potential cost is on the front end, finding the right load, getting them in the right position. Like just that's where it all happens. And then you lock them in, and then it's pretty much easy and low stress, low risk from there. LTL is just reversed. It's easy. You can go to a website, go to a TMS, run a quote like you're booking an airplane ticket, schedule a pickup. That's easy. It's there at your fingertips. But then what could go wrong and off the rails is kind of what happens after you hit book or dispatch. And you're just trading. So like you've kind of paid, for that risk just at a different point in the process. Like you're going to pay $300 versus 3,000 maybe, but because of that, there's a little more risk, a little more damage risk. Transit might be a little longer, but it's just a calculation.
Yeah. So instead of saying, "Hey, wow, I'm upset because this broker carrier lied to me, they didn't show up," it's like the back end where it's like, "Hey, this shipment shows in transit, and all of a sudden now it's been at a Chicago warehouse for 3 days. What's going on there?" Right? It's like either way you're going to deal with it. It just depends on when it is and what the severity is. And again, a lot of people go into it knowing that. I mean, they just know it. I mean, they're like, "Hey, I'm going LTL. That's not a big deal. I'm going to save money. I don't really need it in a certain amount of time, but it's going to save me a lot of money. I'm not going to ship these 2 boxes, on full truckload, when it comes to that rate." But I think the great part about LTL that I preach to my people too is, and what the value it's had for me is that, it does affect full truck. I mean, everything kind of intertwined, right? Everything's kind of together. And the fact that people are successful because they dive in and they really understand it. And a lot of people, that are in it really know the ins and outs of it. It's the same thing in FTL, because it can be easy in full truckload to just, I got dry van loads and I'm doing this, and I look at this and it's like, also the market change, or you lose a customer, or whatever. And like, you have no other skill set because you never dove in. You never became a student of the game. You never really, really wanted to be that value add that I think comes along with a lot of that stuff. And so that's what it's taught me, or really emphasized, what I was already doing, maybe even because it was like, hey, this is what it is. And like, you could go in, and I don't preach against LTL when I'm talking to people. I grew up in the expedite world. So it's like, if you're doing LTL and that's what you want to do and that's what you need and you don't have a time for that, that's great. Then I have some people I can connect you with, to be honest, because it's like, but if you're struggling with it and it's something because it's all that's out there and you don't know that you could book a Sprinter van or a box or something like that and you need it there faster and your customers, bitching over it, then we can talk, and those are conversations you got to have about, hey, the fact that LTL exists, the rates are gonna be higher, this and that. Those are hard conversations to have, but if you explain it right, maybe it's for them, maybe it's not. But I love having LTL connections because Mike Nemi used to be one of them, man. He'd bring on customers and he'd be like, hey, bro, you know how he talks, he was like super smart, but like still like a straight like surfer. Yeah. It was so weird. It's so weird because he'd be like, hey, bro,
he's a snowboarder.
Like, I got a custy. I got this custy, man. Like I dove in with their CFO and like did all their finances and shit. Anyways, he's like, but they want to do some full truckload stuff. And I know you know that. And I'm like, all right, well, I got guys that do full truckload that want to do some LTL stuff, and I know you rock that. So we started swapping that type of thing. It's a great way to really continue to, build yourself in the industry, because if you don't know LTL and maybe it's not even about like, if I had the resources to really dive in and make it successful, I'd do that. But like really everywhere I've been has been okay at it, but not like something where it's like worth diving into. So it's like, I'd rather have some connections and do that type of thing than diving in. Yeah. What do you see? Because you've kind of stayed independent and then kind of went with other places. But like, I know a lot of people that succeed and have their own like LTL platform in which, like you said, they could go on and bid and do their thing. If you're not in that, what's the best way to get into it and really maybe even bring on some customers when really they have that platform in which they can see all that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more options out there now for technology, TMS or integration platforms. There's a ton of options, and you can go to like what I call like a TMS Lite, which is just some API connections. There's not a ton of like, say, reporting or data repositories and all these fancy tools, but you can get a quote from a bunch of carriers. You can book a shipment. You can track it. It kind of handles the basics. So
all that data definitely people use quarterly.
Right. And TJ, to your other point about expedite, there's a lot of LTL shipments I see that should have gone Sprinter van because they're like holding up a production line and they sent it just standard LTL, didn't even guarantee it or upcharge it or anything, and then get mad when it doesn't make it. So, yeah, there's a lot of just still education needed, on service times and proper expectation. And I've been thinking more and more about transit. Like, it's kind of interesting that every zip to zip combo has just one estimated transit day, like per carrier. Obviously it differs carrier to carrier, but like if I'm Old Dominion or XPO or whoever, I'm going to say 43228 to 2702 or whatever is 3 days or 2 days. But that's really going to differ depending on the type of location, type of pickup, type of delivery. Is there an appointment needed? Is it residential versus like a B2B, warehouse? And so hopefully we get to where there's a little more filtering down someday of like more granular estimations of, hey, if this is a grocery shipment and our driver might have to go and sit half a day and wait at the Kroger distribution center or something, like you might want to add another day or two of transit on there versus a nice, one pallet, steel castings back into a dock and just get it off and go. So that's but
that's important to know because, when you look at opportunity, in sales or whatever it's in, you never have anything to gain by making something that you don't do look worse or look bad, right? Because really at the end of the day, it makes you look bad because you don't know it, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's like that's why I like having those conversations where it's like, hey, if LTL is what you do and it doesn't need, it doesn't need to be there at a specific time or it doesn't have this or that or all these things that go with it, then roll with that. And I could be a liaison to where, hey, you may have something that does need to go and you can get a hold of me, or vice versa, where like you said, where it's like, I'm really struggling, like LTL, I'm struggling with it or whatever. And I'm like, do you know about this? Or there's times I have people that are, I mean, I've literally had customers, and I hate saying this, but I don't hate saying it, because you know what? I made such good relationships with them that I still work with them, where they're like putting stuff in sprinters and bin boxes. And I'm like, hey, you could probably go LTL with this. I hate saying that, but like, you could save a lot of money here. And I can get you somebody to talk to, or I get you some information on that, that would know more than what I know. And I like doing that too, because I think it just shows that, hey, I'm humble enough to say that. And they appreciate it. And there's some that are like, some of them, and they wonder why they struggle with budgets and stuff, because they're like, I don't feel like dealing with it. And I'm like,
yeah,
I don't want to
there's
say
a ton of that
both ways. Money.
There's over
But
service.
it's good to have those conversations and at least know, if you're not going to dive into a certain other sector, what its possibilities are and what it can do for your customer. Because just that right there could open up, that not only the relationship, but just their trust with you. When there's trust, they give you more freight.
Yeah, for sure. I remember an account that I was involved with. It was a pharmaceutical company, and they'd just been shipping air freight for a long time, domestically even. And we just put them on a good LTL carrier, and like, they pretty much, had the same service. Obviously a little bit slower, but no claims, no issues. It was a good carrier and saved a ton of money. So back to your question about the platforms, that to me is what is really the mark of a good transportation platform nowadays is the fact that they maybe stay mode agnostic until the service provider is chosen, because you've got, depending on, the transit needed, the size, the weight, dimensions, commodity, like all these different shipment profile items. Like it might be a candidate for LTL, for volume, for shared truckload, for expedite, whatever. So a load is just a load essentially. And then, based on price and transit and all that, like then you lock in the service provider, and that turns it into, okay, this is now an LTL or a truckload or what have you. So that's I think one of the marks of a good system is kind of that flexibility, and then giving all those options, through integrations and APIs, and having them there, instead of just having these silos and buckets and trying to classify mode before you even know everything about the shipment, essentially.
Let me tell you what I know about.
Tony, real quick, Tony, before you go, because I want you to go, because I know you know way more about this than I do. This is my last one I wanted to throw out there that I was interested in. It's so hard for me to pass up opportunity. It's why I don't say I hate it, but I struggled being on the asset side, because I'm so opportunity find, I'm always about it. And man, I'm telling you, the difference between running a fleet of trucks and being in brokerage is that I've only got so many freaking trucks. Like, you can't make trucks just appear, and I've got people saying like, oh, I've got freight, I can do this, everyone's assets. It's like, I'm sitting there going, oh, and it's like, I don't want to piss somebody off by saying like, oh, you're cheaper, I'm going to go with this customer. But that's what I struggle with. And so I would run across times in which I talked to so many people that really struggle with the refrigerated LTL. It was always a big thing. I don't remember one person I talked to that did it, that either wasn't struggling even though they did do it, or wanted to do it and couldn't do it because it was so hard to do. So what is it about that? What is it about that part of it that makes it so, I understand maybe just the availability or whatever it is, maybe it's that, but that makes it so hard, and why so many people, if so many people have a demand for it, why there isn't more of it?
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody out there yet that thinks that's a breeze. There's just a lot of constraints. There's physical constraints, obviously the temperature requirements. When you're talking LTL and you've got multiple shipments on the trailer that might have different temperature requirements, and then you've got to split up the trailer and whatnot. Really, for what I know, and I've learned a lot more about reefer LTL in the last year at Freight Plus than I ever have. There's one carrier out there, FFE, Frozen Food Express, that's kind of like the equivalent to your typical national LTL carrier. They still don't have as many terminals as a Saia or an Estes, but they've got, terminals around the country. They can run kind of like a hub and spoke network. But pretty much everyone else, even if they have national coverage, they're doing like milk runs, and there's a lot of just small regional carriers. It's even though it's called refrigerated LTL, it's really very much like dealing with a lot of truckload carriers. And I would say they're about 10, 15 years in the past when it comes to dealing with third parties. They seemed a little more, wary of like being open to doing business with 3PLs. That's been my experience a little bit, just compared. And I remember the standard LTL carriers being like that as well. When I was at Old Dominion in pricing, we used to make fun of 3PLs all the time. They don't know anything. Like that's not the case now, but back then, it was like, who are these people popping up and taking business? So I think it's a lot of factors. It's the physical constraints. It's much more capital intensive, right? They're, the equipment costs more. They're running through fuel and energy in order to keep this stuff cool. It's very, very hard for a carrier, a frozen or refrigerated carrier, to operate and keep things at a precise temperature. So because of that, like we're already in the kind of old school trucking industry as a whole, all modes and sub modes. Then you throw on top, it's like one of the most difficult modes of everything. I can't think of a good comparison, but like it's asking a company to like do a lot of things at once when it comes to temperature, routings, appointments, pickup and delivery, equipment, fuel. It's just crazy.
So my thought then was, my last point on this was, I think to myself, like, man, when there's demand for it, there's a lot of people that are needing it and wanting it. It's weird to see somebody not jump on that opportunity. Obviously it's going to take more capital or, things like that to get started, or maybe some innovation, because I was thinking about the other day, I was like, man, if you could just get like a compartmental truck, like something that you could break out into cubes almost, in which, each one is fed a different temperature, whatever it is. Of course it costs more money and energy, but then I started thinking, maybe the demand isn't that high. It's just that those type of people would rather are wanting help so much that they're more willing to have the conversation or answer your cold call or answer your message compared to other people that have the solutions already in front of them. So it's like, are they answering and having more open to have that conversation because they're like, man, if there's a better solution, then let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Or is it because there's actually more of them that do need it? You know what I mean? Like maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, everything's relative, right? So like it is fairly small. I don't have a number on what the actual reefer LTL market is, but I would say it's considerably smaller than standard LTL market, which is already a drop in the bucket compared to truckload. So it's a pretty small area. And then just, it's like a pain versus reward spectrum or trade-off. It's like, okay, I'm a lot more motivated as a refrigerated shipper to just fill up a truckload versus dealing with the pain and the cost of the reefer side. So it's kind of, in some ways, it's the same, comparison with just standard dry truckload and LTL. But standard LTL is just a lot further progressed. There's more options. There's less risk, less constraint. So it tends to be a good option. But you're talking, again, like the refrigerated side. And yeah, it's when you're talking like a couple pallets and especially a lot of food products, and then compare that to the cost of refrigerated LTL, like, even before anything might go wrong, you're really balancing, your freight costs versus whatever you're making on the cost of goods sold.
Yeah, and I had a friend tell me this last thing is, he's like, you walk in a Meijer, you walk in a Kroger, you walk in a Walmart. He said, when you look at the pallets that maybe in the middle of the aisle at night or whatever it is, they may be mixed up a little bit, right? And if you're shipping, if everything has to be at a different temperature that you're shipping in a shipment, it's hard, and you can't really do it to fulfill things. So he's like, it's why like at a Meijer that when you go to the freezer section, it's all connected. So everything they hold in those freezers and those fridges are all at the same temperature. That way they can ship full truckload.
Yep.
and they can keep the shelves full. And they just won't carry. They just don't carry unless it's specialized, or they do it there on site. Things that need a certain temperature, need something different than that. That's why you got to go to a specific store, or maybe something local, right? Like a butcher, or a local chemical store, or a local whatever,
Right. Yep.
to get that type of thing, because they basically have it set up to where there's room temperature in our freezer section. That's it. And that's what we're hauling in, and that's the way we go full truckload with it and restock and keep our shelves replenished, and not have to deal with all these different things that are back and forth. And so that's why you get more in volume at a bigger store like that, but less in choice when it comes to something specific. And that's how he described it to me, and it made sense. But I don't know if that's does it make sense?
That
too?
makes a lot of sense. Yeah, totally. I mean, you look like I know a little bit about like the Aldi network of stores, and there are very strategically placed distribution centers that are fairly close to these stores. They have a long time relationship. I think it's Sharp Transit is one company, and then there's only 2 or 3 companies, I believe, that do all trucking for Aldi nationwide. But yeah, they're just daily, loading up a refrigerated truck daily, taking it down to the store. So less risk that way if you have facilities and you can kind of de-risk your network. Obviously the hardest thing is cross country LTL multi-stop, when you got to worry about that temperature going up and down. But yeah, it's two other things just real quick. Like, it's just a different market. Like, you do see a lot of and I can't remember many of the names now, but like there are some startup or fairly new type companies that are building out refrigerated networks, and they're either a tech platform or just a third-party service provider on top, but then they are building these networks of cold storage and refrigerated trucking. So that's more common in the space. It's I think there's more like asset light companies like that in the refrigerated space because the refrigerated storage and everything goes so hand in hand and is so important with it. And then, to that point, a lot of, say, refrigerated carriers also might have warehouse facilities, and it's kind of that 1-2 punch instead of like just your pure, standard LTL carrier that's really all they do is just haul freight.
Tony, and you may be able to answer this one. What were the rumors about this? And I've been talking. I always thought it was so cool when I thought about it. Somebody told me this, and I don't know if it's true, but C.H. Robinson was coming out with like they were building these things that look like parking garages, right? That had like what do you call them? The parks, like enclosed parking spots that were where you could if it was refrigerated, you could drop a trailer in, right? And leave a trailer in there and close it, almost like a storage unit would be like, right? And to not use fuel, to not use whatever on the which costs more than what the whole facility would be, and in strategic areas again, in which you could drop trailers where if you had to drop only half of it off, and then you could deliver the rest till the next day or 2 days from then or whatever, you could park the trailer in there, go run more loads, whatever it was. It was and you could set the temperature to what it needed to be at, right? And do that. Is that something you've heard? Am I the only one that's heard that? I feel like it's.
Dude, that's like buying a car out of a vending machine. I don't think
that's what I'm saying. I don't know if they ever followed through. Maybe I had a dream about it, but I swear to God, somebody told me about that, and I've been waiting. Like, it's been probably 2 years now that I heard that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not, but
I haven't heard of that. But yeah, it might have happened, or it might have just been an idea. There were like smaller pods that like Averitt and some of the standard LTL carriers would put on their regular trailers, and it had space for like one pallet, and it was completely enclosed, basically like shipping a cooler. But again, just
freeze protect. They throw a blanket on it.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation. The opposite, the freeze protect. My gosh, some of the heaters they try to throw on those trailers, like
heater. It's a blanket over the pallet.
We would have heaters, like some of the carriers have heaters as well.
Yeah. The freeze protect is more or less what they're worried about, which I've run into is where it's going to stay overnight if it's an overnight transit. While it's running, blankets, you can figure that out, but it's that overnight stay where it's like, okay, where's this trailer going to be overnight?
Yeah, it's the stop.
And I had my neighbors growing up. It was a husband and wife. They had a huge house out in the country, and they drove this humongous truck. I mean, this thing was like 6 miles long, just the truck. And they made a bunch of money in the stock market, got out, and decided to just go run the country. Single, two, they're kind of weird. You used to see them running out of the hot tub naked over there, so it was weird. But they would run the country. They would go. They had a house in Arizona and Indiana, and they would go back across the country. And they had a specialized trailer with a huge. The inside of their truck was like you had to step down to the shower. It was awesome. But what they did was they started running for this. It was actually low for C.H. Robinson. They went down to Vanderbilt, and they were running stem cell research. And they had stuff that they wanted to send that could not be refrigerated, and stuff that had to be at a certain temperature to where, and they didn't know it when they went in for the first run, right? And they get in there and they're like, oh yeah, it has to be at this temperature, to where like if it's not, there's an alarm on the freezer that goes off because it's not because it's so important. Mm-hmm. So they're like, well, wait, before you do this, let us go to Home Depot and figure this out. So they went over to Home Depot. They bought themselves some time, and they built a wall basically in the middle of their trailer and insulated it. Okay. And then they put a air conditioning unit in it for the front, for the nose of the trailer. And they had a lift gate because it's a specialized trailer that they put a generator on to run that. And then they bought baby monitors and put one in the back and one up in the cab. So if the alarm did go off, they would hear it. And they did this for that first shipment. And then they were also able to haul the others. And then they went and had it actually professionally done so that they had it. So they were running kind of like LTL or partial, whatever it was, of half of their trailer refrigerated, half of it not. And even if some of the cold air did leak into the back of the trailer, it didn't hurt what it was. But on that type of thing, and just got innovative and did that, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool for like that super specialized, like, probably really high cost freight. So it was worth it. I didn't know Home Depot sold time though. That's pretty interesting.
Hey, you find the right person at Home Depot, you can buy whatever you want. You know what I mean? You just got to go around the back. They're hanging out.
That's right.
All right, Tony, you dive in. Sorry.
So
I went on a tangent.
Yeah, you guys went down a rabbit hole there for a little bit.
My bad.
So as a shipper, this is what I know about LTL, and I'll sum it up real quick here because I hate LTL, and it's both for real. And all I know is that LTL, based on, in essence, like the Teamsters have gotten together and monitored or lobbied, because they're the only ones that really in the trucking industry have the power to lobby, have lobbied for these rules, hours of service. If you want to complain about the hours of service, LTL is what brought you that. And because their networks are set up, and this is all stuff that I was, this was shared with me as a fact, and I don't know if this is true or not. I'm just trying to give you what was told to me and how I understood it. So they would say that these hub and spoke networks would set their terminals up about 4.5 hours apart, roughly. Mm-hmm. And the reason they wanted 10-hour hours of service was they wanted a driver to leave this terminal, drive his 4 hours, unload and reload a trailer, that's an hour, and then drive back and unload and reload that trailer, and there's his 10 hours. The driving time is done, and he had to have his break, and it's all good, and everything's cool. But what that tells me is my skid that's going from South Bend, Indiana to Dallas, Texas is going to go to Chicago, then to Peoria, then to St. Louis, and it's going to get offloaded and reloaded and offloaded and reloaded and offloaded and reloaded and offloaded and reloaded. And then it gets to the Dallas terminal where it's going to go and then get distributed on the local truck there for the guy you see every day. I love my LTL carrier guy because he comes in every day. It's the same guy. And I'm telling you, so many shippers use carriers based on the guy that services them being cool instead of the price or the service or the discounts or any of that stuff. And I know that when you negotiate your volume as a large shipper anyways, you can negotiate that LTL pricing structure based on percentage of claims or something like that to that nature. But you can get ridiculously good pricing in LTL if you're owning your own rates and it's not your TMS system or whatever. And when you own those rates, you're free to do with them what you please. But so that, gosh dang it, I keep cutting out. So that's what I know about LTL, and I love it because it's so cheap and easy. But I hate it because we can't package well enough to be successful in LTL.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to call them because it should have been on the full truckload in the first place, which means I had to either chase it or I planned something wrong.
Yeah.
So I love and hate LTL.
Yeah.
So
I
the
mean,
people
it's a
that
good
do
tool.
it, before you start, Curtis, the people that do it, Tony, like what you're saying is to do it successfully, a lot of them have really good packaging or wrapping or whatever it is that they do, knowing it's going to go from truck to truck to truck. Or
so when you ship a truckload, it gets loaded, driven to the destination, and unloaded. When you ship LTL, it's going to go to terminal, unless they have a different network that's set up. I know Siva does some stuff that's a little more place to place and then distribution. It's less stops, but you can get those longer runs in some of your LTL carriers too. But you really have to know what you're asking, what you're talking about, and who to be able to do that. So yeah, packaging is key in LTL, in my opinion. Dimensions and density, right, Curtis? Dimensions and density are key, along with the weight. That's part of the density. But if you package it so that it can be handled more than one pickup and drop off, you just times 10. If you can do that 10 times, then you'll be safe in LTL.
Got it. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, before all that is super important. Yes, absolutely. But before, you need to be aware of the differences in carriers and how they run their line haul networks, because you've got hub and spoke, you've got super regional, which is what we all heard a lot about in the last couple of years. It's what Yellow was trying to get to, and that's where you're loading as many direct trailers as you can. And obviously, if you're a bigger carrier with more lane density to more places, it gets easier to do that. But surprisingly enough, there's a few big carriers out there that you look at the tracking on your shipments with them, and it is what you're saying, being just bouncing through every single terminal and getting cross-docked. And there's always a direct correlation between that and longer transit and more damage. Yeah, there's no way around it. So, but what some of the FedEx Freight is known for this, Old Dominion, a bunch of the nationals that do a really good job. They will say I'm in Atlanta and I've got 8 trailers that I need to get heading up towards Chicago for my line haul schedules in a certain evening. I'm probably going to have enough direct Chicago proper, Metro Chicago freight to fill a few of those, but probably not all 8. So then I might, I'm going to start. You always want to nose load, obviously, the furthest destination, and then start backfilling with, what you might hit on the way up there. So my last couple trailers for the night might be a quarter or a half, just Chicago proper. And then the rest might be Indianapolis or wherever I'm going to, whatever terminals I'm going to hit on the way through. So, and even, the good carriers will kind of optimize that sort of loading with their customers. Think of a tire shipper. A lot of tire shippers actually ship LTL because they've got 30 tires going in this small shop, 40 going over here. There's a lot of small tire orders that get sent out by Goodyear, Continental, whoever. So the good carriers will tell them the order based on their line haul network and the terminals they know they're going to travel through. They say, okay, load the trailer in this order. And then that minimizes, it's better for them, right? Fewer dock workers to pay, less labor, less handling. And then it's better for the freight. It's better for the shipper as well.
So let me pick your brain.
Magic. And then a lot of them do slip seat. They'll, instead of somebody driving, working the dock, picking up freight and driving back, they'll take that hour of dock work out. And they'll say, all right, let's have them drive 5 hours, meet somebody that came 5 hours from the south, swap trailers, and then take it back. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to pick your brain then. So one of the little cheat codes I use to make my LTL decision, besides the pricing, because in our network, we own some of the lanes or we own some of the pricing and we use TMS pricing on some others. in my experience. I don't know what the story is now at where I'm at, but let's see, how do I say this? So I will look at who the carrier is and my gut feel, right? And what I know about them in here. That's all subjective, existential opinion. And then I will go with a price / transit time, because like we had this place that was, Elkhart, Indiana to Decatur, Alabama, and FedEx would do it overnight. It'd be 1-day transit because they had a line haul that would do that, and I could load it today and it would deliver tomorrow in Alabama. And I don't know if I've made that drive myself in a car and a truck, and I'm telling you, it's all you can do. It's all you can do. And I'm like, this is outstanding service. It just happened to line up with my needs.
Yeah.
So when you're choosing LTL, what are those cheat codes? Like, is the price right with the service times?
Yeah.
And is that something to look at? Or what are some other cheat codes to look at?
Yeah. Do you have an option to look
LTL?
at something like that where it's like knowing, hey, I know this all these carriers and you get the rates, but it's like, I know this carrier has a domicile or has a warehouse that's in this lane or whatever it is, like Tony said.
Right.
Is there a way to see that stuff?
That's needed. There's no like one-stop shop to show all these different things, but definitely just from a process standpoint, like you always want to cast a pretty wide net and send an RFP out or talk to a lot of different LTL carriers just for that very reason. Like see
any decent TMS is going to show you transit time for your LTL shipments.
Right. So transit time and cost are the two, the two big ones. Obviously, if you have any way to collect and quantify historical carrier performance on a lane by lane level. But again, to your point earlier, like it's not talked about enough. Like we all talk about, oh, this carrier's good, this one's bad at a national like brand level, but it's that driver on the route that make or break your experience with them. If I was going in to sell LTL at like a local terminal somewhere, the one thing I'd ask for is, can I pick my driver? That was going to be that's going to have a bigger impact on my performance as a sales rep.
That should be out in all of them.
Yeah. Than whatever bonus or salary I negotiate. So yeah, transit price.
So you don't have any cheat codes?
There is
other than historical data.
Historical data, balance, you can get it. Knowledge.
Balance
you got to look at
experience with price and transit time.
Yep. That's.
Well, man, you're making me feel like I'm doing it right, and I don't feel like I know enough about it to make the right choices.
Feel that way.
Stop beating yourself
Seriously.
up.
Well, I don't feel like I know enough about LTL to be good at it to the point where I can confidently say this is going to happen. And I always provide an extra day when I quote the transit time to sales, because inevitably the hot one is always going to get delayed somewhere, or I chose wrong.
Right.
That's my question. Is like I hear a lot of people, like I've always been told, like 3 days late is on time, and it's like how in the full truckload world, especially coming from the expedite side, of course, it's always on my mind. But
get anywhere in 3 days.
Right, but like how important or how I guess my question is, how do I phrase this? When people do LTL, like shippers, do they just know that there's a higher risk of it just taking longer than what it's quoted at? Or when you see transit time, does it ever stick true to that? Or is it like you said, historical data, but like, are there scorecards? Are there, is people held to that, or is it just?
Yes. So first of all, the biggest caveat is like, all during COVID. And then we had this little window in early this year, really early 2023, where things kind of normalized. Pricing and service was headed back to normal. And then all of a sudden yellow's going out. And then now we have our second black swan of the year, the summer, with the Estes, technical hack and being shut down. So LTL has kind of gotten beaten up. And service just industry wide, there are companies out there that do very consistently track LTL service carrier by carrier. And even they're saying, it's still not back to pre-COVID. So I think it's not an excuse. It is a variable to consider. Like it's been rougher. Things have been more volatile. But again, if you have the right carrier on the right lane for your freight, like you said it all. Like, if depending on where the hubs are, the bigger facilities, where the terminals are located, how close they are to the shipper or the consignee, a lot of the national LTL carriers will run team trucks as well. So and I'm wondering, Tony, with your, what was it, Indiana to Alabama, like maybe that was a team run for FedEx.
It could have been.
So
I don't know.
They just kept going. So that's it. Really, it's hard to like say, well, OD is the best or FedEx is the best. Like, it is so granular, and all that information is there. It's just spread out. It's in rules tariffs. It's on carrier websites. It's in different TMS platforms with their own historical tracking. So there's just a lot of silos in LTL, but all the information is there. I try to look at it like, and I may have told you guys this before, but like the movie and the book Moneyball, where like they're trying to find undervalued players that can get on base, because getting on base was the most important factor to winning games, right? So they didn't care about home runs, they didn't care about triples, they just wanted them on base, even if they got walked. So that, to me, like if each carrier is like a baseball player, and all the lanes are like positions and stuff, like you could pick, I won't name names, but you can pick the ones that are traditionally known as the lower quality carriers that people. Well,
this is why I love this show, because people think I'm some freight guru, and I may play it off that way. Shut up, Tony. But that is a great freaking analogy. Right there.
So every LTL carrier out there, including Yellow in the past and some of the other dogs now, they are the best at least one lane in the country. They're better than anybody else, and they're likely going to be a lot cheaper than the good ones. So if you can figure out where are like the undervalued carriers, where it's kind of like arbitrage, like the performance is high, it's similar to a top tier carrier, but you're still going to benefit from that lower cost. That's the hack, really, but it's hard. It's hard to get to that.
I tell everybody all the time in freight, they say good, fast, and cheap. You can't have all three. Pick two. And I'm like, bull crap. That's a terrible analogy. It's a terrible rule of thumb to go by. It's a terrible rule, because all three of those things are subjective. You cannot define fast. Your fast and my fast are two different things. You're in horse racing and I'm in IndyCar, baby. Fast is something totally different. Yeah. And good is something totally different.
You know what?
And cheap is something totally different.
You know what?
So I get all three every time, and you just explained that.
Shout out to Matt Anderson. That's my boy, E2 Open. So E2 Open is doing that. So there's all different types of 3PLs, right? You've got you get freight through Ryder, Schneider, whatever. They all do different things. E2 Open's like their push is, what they do is they basically they manage carriers, and then they introduce them to shippers. Shippers go through them and they introduce who they think would be. So what they're doing now is basically, once you get as a part of their network as a carrier or a broker, they rank you in lanes, right? So the Utah is, say Salt Lake City to California lane, right? You could be a platinum carrier, a gold carrier, or silver carrier, or bronze carrier, right? And and then they have other data in there too. And then that way, when a shipper comes to them and they say, hey, this is what we have, they say, okay, well, we're going to introduce you to this carrier, and this carrier, and we'll set up the meeting, right? And introduce you to them. And then that means that, like you said, there could be this a Utah carrier that's what they do. That they specialize in that freaking lane. But up to this point, all the sales calls, everything else is just, it just kind of comes down to like whether you trust the person, because they're telling you, oh, I can cover your freight here. We're great in this lane. We're great in this lane. And you don't know whether they are or not. And E2 Open's coming with this data saying, hey, this is a platinum carrier in it. Here's 3 platinum carriers and 4 gold carriers in this lane. If you want to, how many do you want to be introduced to? You talk to them, and let's see, and let's piece together this for you. And I thought that is such a great idea, because it's like you give people that, hey, I've only got, I may have 300 assets. Right? 300 trucks, but I'm running in 3 lanes, and that's it. And we master those lanes.
Yeah.
Right. But how do you pinpoint what freight then, how valuable are you really when you go out and sell?
Well, what that makes me
that's a great-
think of, that's a really good point, and I think I wish there was more of that. Like that's what, like, you know, the Eds, Burn Logistics, Big Ed and Ed, they're doing a lot of that, like matching on both sides, like the right carrier for the right shipper and everything. If there was more of that versus like, I mean, there's definitely value for third parties that are a layer up.
Yeah.
You know, like
they're different. You know, Ryder has a lot of people that they go on site, you know, like they'll be on
right. Yeah.
like on site. Like there's different ways they do it. You're right.
But the typical approach is going to shippers, selling through to the shipper on savings usually, or, you know, just better performance. Right. If more third parties were selling through from the carrier side and saying, hey, I know what you're really good at, carrier, and then matching them with the right shipper, the right business opportunity. Like, I think in the end, it's both. Like, it's if you're a third party, if you're a 3PL that has really good, you know, partner driven carrier relationships, especially in the LTL world, as well as shipper, then really you are just matching the best carrier for the best, you know, the best lane or the best account. So
it does depend on what's going on. So if it's
right,
you know, one of those things where it's, you know, those are the conversations I have. You know, when I'm talking with a shipper, I say, listen, I want to see all your lanes, but I'm really probably just going to price the ones that we're strong in. Now, the difference is, and I've talked about this before, is committed capacity to regular capacity, right? So it's like, you know, if I'm strong in this lane, there's a reason. I've got drivers that either live at origin, destination, whatever. They go through it. They keep their wife happy. They do all these things that they want to stay on that lane. They'll take it for a cheaper rate because it's what keeps their either family or life or whatever it is in their schedule where it needs to be. And those guys will do whatever it takes to stay on that lane, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I talk to them, I'm always like, hey, you know, like, in order for me to do that, though, I got to have some data in. So we may broker to start. Let's push for assets, right? But I got to have data. I got to be able to recruit, because if I can recruit somebody specifically for that lane, that is a committed capacity somewhere where we'll be strong. So let's bid on the stuff that we're strong on, and then look to grow other places, right? And that's kind of how I work, you know, the brokerage and asset side. Now, but it's not a guarantee. It's not something that's already there. You know, like it's not. I don't have. I mean, I guess I could, but like I don't have like the data pulled up to say, hey, like this is, you know, we're platinum in this lane, and we're, you know, whatever. Like I don't, you know, that type of thing right there just lays it out a lot more simpler for people. And in the LTL world as well, because it's like, hey, you know, this is where our warehouses are, right? This is where our, you know, yards are. And this is where we excel. And that makes it so much better when it comes to that stuff, I think.
100%. Yeah. And that's why I always push back, you know, maybe from a macro level, freight is a commodity, but LTL is not. There's so many differences. And, you know, you're not just winning if you get the cheapest price. You got to look at all those other things: terminal location, technology, you know, your local driver. Like, it all matters. So yeah, that's
well,
what.
Hey, go ahead, finish.
No, that's just what we need. That's what it all boils down to. You know, keep reminding people that just be good to your carriers, give them good freight, well packaged freight. Basically, don't be like Tony.
And
I'm a terrible packaging person.
We love that you came on, Kurt. I know you got to run. I know Tony's got to run. He's getting not a haircut, but a beard cut. He has to have somebody trim it for him because he gets very Amish-like up there. But we appreciate you coming on, man. And guys, go follow Curtis. If you don't know Curtis, go follow him. He's the type of guy you can reach out to. In this industry, it's tough. You know, people with the response time. If you got questions, if you've got anything, he's got, you know, some other things going on too, you know, event-wise and education-wise. Follow him, reach out to him, learn more about it, because it does open up a lot of opportunities.
And if you don't understand it, LTL, go see Curtis, because he'll help you understand LTL.
Curtis will.
That's right.
He's the man.
Thanks again for coming on.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Always
Thanks, guys.
awesome.
Have a good one.
All right. Take care. Bye.